In this video, you will learn the #1 most effective counter that you can use against every melee DPS. You'll learn how to turn those feral druids from king of the jungle into stinky little kittens. And those rogues, yeah, the ones who play like they have 5 different Adderall prescriptions, you'll learn how to make their lives so miserable that they're going to go back to the pharmacy to deal with the headache you just gave them. Of course, this is going to require you to know exactly what to look out for in Arena, which is obviously a problem since the Blizzard UI is absolutely awful for PvP. Just look at this mess of icons. How could anyone spot a single cooldown? And who has the time to memorize what all of those icons mean anyway? This is the exact problem we've solved for you with the brand new skill capped UI. In less than a minute, you can instantly install the best interface for PvP as everything is set up right in front of your eyes. And with our brand new update, you can now toggle between PvP and PvE with the click of a button, giving you zero compromise no matter what content you play. Skill cap members can unlock exclusive profiles for both game modes while getting instant access to hundreds of videos, including class courses, role tips, positioning guides, and a brand new course that teaches you how to counter every class in the game. Best of all, everything we offer is backed up by a rank up guarantee. If you don't gain at least 400 rating while using our service, you'll get a full refund, no questions asked. Let's start off with DK, where their best counter is Blizzard Entertainment, since there is a 100% chance they will get nerfed in Season 1 of the next expansion. Jokes aside, we're guessing that at some point for this season, you have found yourself getting blasted by a Frost DK, all while you are stun locked from 100 to 0. So how do we make sure this doesn't happen? Let's counter their burst in 3 easy steps. Step 1 is simple, spread out. You don't ever want to be stacked against any DK team. DKs are a victim of Mythic Plus class design, doing insane AoE damage thanks to a few mechanics, but especially Death and Decay since it causes their abilities to automatically cleave. The only thing that DK wants is for your entire team to stay stacked on the same pixel. With their abilities automatically cleaving, they're going to be 3 times the damage. Alright, now we're ready for step 2, which is to use some type of counter during their death grip. The crucial part of their AoE setup is Blinding Sleep, which is a disorient effect that disables you from using most defensive cooldowns. Frost DKs will combo this with a stun and then typically a Strangulate, making their Pillar of Frost twice as scary. The goal is to try and counter the grip as it happens. Some classes can do this better than others. If you're a priest or a mage, you could fade or blink, but for everyone else, your goal is to try and trade a defensive mid-air. It sounds impossible, but if you can manage to press a damage reduction CD before you hit the ground, we'll make that DK rage as their go is now completely ruined. Just to be extra safe, let's move on to step 3, which is to make sure you disarm their burst. Even if you manage to pre-trade your defensive, there's still a high chance that someone on your team will get blasted with damage. The cooldown to watch against Frost is, well, Pillar of Frost, and for Unholy, it's Unholy Assault. Very creative, Blizzard. If you have a disarm ready and you see either one of these buffs, just send it instantly. You're going to instantly stop the majority of their damage. Alright, but what about those demon hunters? We know they're not that popular these days, but that could change with a single hotfix. By this time, 99% of players should know that demon hunters hit like a truck during metamorphosis, turning them from a dweeby-looking elf into Illidan Stormrage himself, wearing some purple pajamas, of course. Most players have the basic intuition that meta is one of those CDs you need to respect, but what they don't realize is that I-Beam is the true silent killer. I-Beam will automatically proc Metamorphosis for 5 seconds, essentially giving their main cooldown for free. Now, don't freak out since the counterplay is really simple. If you can stop the I-Beam mid-cast with a stun, coil, and so on, you essentially shut down this smaller meta window. If your eyes see I-Beam, your brain just needs to think CC. All you need to do is buy just enough time for the meta to fade. Now it's time to declaw those cats. Feral Druid is obviously a bit frustrating to play against, since they're basically a sub-rogue and Fury Warrior all in one, while also cosplaying as a caster at times. They're either stunning your whole team, doing unhealable damage, or spamming Cyclone all game. The solution to make sure this doesn't happen is simple: train them to the ground. Just like real-life cats, feral druids get stressed and can't really do all of their overpowered things while they're under brutal pressure. Good druids will try and kite away, but bad druids are going to soak damage like a target dummy, and you'll have a much easier time stopping those cyclones. If you can manage to force them into bear form, it's going to tank their damage like it's a meme cryptocurrency. And before we move on, one giant misconception is that roots are useless against feral druids since they can simply shift out of them. This is only half true and is kind of missing an important point. By using a root on a feral druid, you force them to burn at least 1 global, which doesn't seem like much, but can stall a tiny bit of momentum over the entire game. Moving on, even though there only seems to be one person in the world playing survival at all times, it's always one of those specs which is deceptively strong. Hunters are another one of those classes who seem to completely shut down under pressure. The moment you attack them, it's like they forget that freezing trap is even on their bars. And perhaps the biggest issue with survival is the fact that they want to use their freedom aggressively in order to have uptime. But if they're forced to freedom in order to kite, they're going to have a much harder time landing CC on your healer. But we want to give you more solid advice than simply training them to the ground. So, for you healers out there, one of the best things you can do against any survival hunter is to maintain maximum distance. What this does is create enough space to give you time to react to harpoon. If they can't use intimidation to stun, they will try and harpoon towards you to land their freezing trap. So if you can make that gap as big as possible, you will have a much easier time using your counterplay, whether it's a fade, grounding totem, and so on. You should also not be afraid to root their pet whenever you can, as it actually prevents them from using a bunch of abilities, including a lot of damage spells and even CC. Moving on to Windwalker Monk. Here we have a spec that is a bit tricky. That's because their main offensive cooldown has 2 charges, which makes it a bit difficult to do that whole cooldown trading thing we're always talking about. As you know, Storm, Earth, and Fire summons clones that duplicate the Monk's damage, and unfortunately they can no longer be CC'd like they could in the past. So how are we supposed to deal with their main cooldown if it has 2 charges? Well, what you shouldn't do is disarm. Monks are one of the few melee where disarming does absolutely nothing. Blizzard decided that monks need to wield weapons but hit with their fists. Weird. Anyway, what you really need to pay attention to is their Celestial Conduit ability. This is a channeled spell that is very obvious to recognize since it has a long cast time and literally makes them float in the air and shoot out light beams like it's a rave party. If you can use any form of micro CC to stop the channel, you're going to shut down a considerable amount of their burst. We know some of you out there might be pointing out that monks have a PvP talent that makes them immune during their channel, but this almost never sees play in PvP anyway, so you can safely assume CC will work. Monks also have this weird mobility quirk that you can kind of exploit, which Chanimal will help demonstrate in a sec. Both Roll and Flying Serpent Kick can only move in a straightforward direction, which makes their mobility a bit clunky. We know this clip is old, but watch as Chanimal waits for the monk to press Roll, and when he does, Chanimal just 180s and walks the other way. Now let's figure out how to counter those Rets. The entire Paladin class suffers from one key problem. They have no way of stopping CC from range. When DKs can AMS, warriors can reflect, and rogues can shadow step kick, Ret Paladins have absolutely nothing to prevent mages, warlocks, and druids from endlessly harassing them with spammable ranged crowd control. This is something you should abuse at all times, and if you want to take things a step further, then the next thing you should look for is shutting down their freedom. Ret Paladins aren't exactly known for their mobility, which is why Papa Blizzard had to step in and make them a pseudo-ranged spec. Regardless, Ret Paladins need uptime in order to do things like Hodge, and they're going to need to freedom in order to cross the map. Blessing of Freedom is one of those high-value dispels. If you play Priest or Shaman, try and purge it instantly, and better yet, mages should look to steal it as soon as they can. Even if you can't remove Freedom, chances are you can micro-CC it with a stun, coil, and so on. The goal is just to deny some of their uptime and make them annoyed that they can't move during their main mobility cooldown. Chances are if you skip to anywhere in this video, it's to this section, where it's time to counter rogues. It doesn't matter what spec they are playing, what expansion or season it is, or whether rogues are even high tier, they are always one of the most annoying specs to fight in PvP. Fortunately, the number 1 counter is going to be pretty consistent across all 3 specs. First, a bit of trivia. What is the most important offensive cooldown for Assassination and Outlaw? If you said Deathmark and Adrenaline Rush, think again. The best abilities for both of these specs is actually Stealth and Vanish. Assassination gets insane momentum during its openers out of Stealth thanks to the combination of Subterfuge and improved Garrett, allowing them to triple CC your whole team, all while getting out massive bleeds. Outlaw is pretty much the same. Stealth not only gives them more damage and control, but even allows them to freeze their cooldown so they don't expire. Pretty insane. If you've ever wondered why Outlaws randomly do a lot of damage, it's because of Stealth and Vanish. Your number 1 goal when playing against any Assassination or Outlaw rogue is to immediately CC them out of Stealth. Stuns, disarms, roots, coils, you name it. As long as you can shut them down for a few seconds immediately once they open, you're going to shut down a lot of momentum. Just ask any rogue and they will tell you how annoying it is to get micro CC'd the moment they open. Subtlety is a bit trickier though, since they're once again the only rogue spec with Shadow Dance. But here we have to be careful since not every Shadow Dance is created equal. The real cooldown you need to care about is Shadow Blades, a buff that increases their damage and feeds them a ton of combo points, allowing them to spam out finishers. If Blades is combined with Flagellation, they will build a huge mastery bonus over time, acting as yet another damage modifier. Shadow Dance with Blades is definitely not the time to be greedy with defensives. Don't overreact the moment you get stunned. Wait until you see Shadow Blades 2 and simply make a 1-to-1 trade, and that's the last time you will have to think about the rogue for quite some time. In case you've been out of the loop, Enhancement Shaman is one of the best melee in the War Within. With one of the scariest cooldown windows in the game, Enhance can easily catch you off guard with its massive Ascendance burst. But while you're busy panic pressing your defensive, there's probably one thing you didn't notice on the ground: Surging Totem. This single ability can deal a ton of AoE damage to any player within its radius, essentially feeding the shaman damage for free as long as you're standing inside of it. It's not one of those totems you can simply kill, but it is worth playing around no matter what. In fact, you should get in the habit of playing around totems because they're more important than you might think. Grounding, Tremor, Earth Grab, and even Healing Stream Totem are worth killing if you can quickly do so. In fact, this is something that you will see Waz routinely do for his team. He's like a trained sniper ready to shoot down any totem for his team instantly. It may not seem high impact, but these small plays really matter in the long run. The counter to Warriors is going to sound so unbelievably dumb at first, but we promise it works. If there's one thing Warriors hate more than anything else, and yes, that even includes rogues, it's being snared at a pillar. It's unbelievably counterintuitive, but line of sight is what makes Warriors rage more than anything else. While they can heroic leap, LOS completely denies their charge, shutting down their #1 gap closer. And speaking of charge, it's one of the few gap closers in the game that can be countered mid-animation. If you're able to CC or even knock the enemy warrior at the very beginning of their charge animation, it will prevent them from closing the complete gap. But notice how this doesn't work if your CC lands towards the end of the animation. In fact, this trick can work against other gap closers too, like Roll, Flying Serpent Kick, Wild Charge, Gust of Wind, Grappling Hook, and Harpoon. If you're fast with your CC or knock, you will completely prevent some melee from closing the gap. This is exactly the game knowledge we teach at skillcap.com, where we focus on teaching what can actually increase your rating. We've got hundreds of videos, including class courses, role tips, positioning guides, and a brand new course that teaches you how to counter every class in the game. We focus on teaching WoW from your perspective, with our ultimate goal of making sure you improve. And that's why we offer a 400 rating gain guarantee. If you don't rank up, you don't pay. It's as simple as that. To get access to hundreds of exclusive guides, be sure to click that discount link below. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.